Welcome to the Cycling Demystified 12 Days of Bike Fitting. If this is your first time here, I'm your host, Wei, lead bike fitter of Foundation Bike Fit, and I'll be joined by my fellow fitter Matt and our in-house mechanic Ev from Frequency Cycle Works. 2024 has been an amazing year for the podcast, and as we near the end of the year, we wanted to create a little something extra to say thanks to all of you for listening, for your feedback and for all of your support. So what we've done is asked bike fitters from around the world and friends of the podcast to contribute an actionable bike fit tip to help you find even more comfort, efficiency and performance in 2025. Each day in the lead up till Christmas, we will play one tip and then the team and I will explore each tip in a bit more detail so you can get the most from all these nuggets of gold. Welcome to day 2, where John Higgins of FitKit Systems gives his tip.
Hello, this is John from FitKit Systems. Here's my bike fitting tip. There are 3 primary forces acting on the cyclist that you have to contend with, and the most important one is probably not what you're thinking. It's not air, it's not pedaling, it's gravity. Gravity never sleeps. Doesn't matter if you're standing still, going slow, going fast, going uphill, downhill, around a hill. Gravity is always at work on your body. And this affects your weight distribution, your posture, and where pressure occurs on the saddle and on the handlebars. So paying attention to your relationship to gravity is fundamental to achieving a good fit position and often resolving pressure points and issues and improving muscular performance as well. Because if your body is not fighting gravity, it can focus on propulsion instead of postural compensations.
Well, That one completely over my head.
Yeah. All right, so one for me and you, Matt, to get a little bit geeky. I mean, this could be like an hour-long podcast in itself.
Yes.
There's so much in that, but like excellent tip from John. So I think what we need to do is just describe a little bit of how we should think about gravity and how that affects our bike fitting and what people need to do to assess how gravity is acting upon them. Like what will they be feeling, what sensations maybe they're experiencing, and then what they can do. Just some simple kind of takeaways, I think. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
All right. So
I think starting by, how does gravity affect your body and why do we care on the bike?
I think if we think about the cycling posture, you're basically leant forward, hands are outstretched in front of you, and your head is positioned somewhere over the bars. Now, because you're all clever people, you've all got heavy brains, and so heavy heads, that acts on your body. And your body's primary function really is to protect the head, to protect the brain. It will do everything it can to keep the head in a position where it is carried safely. So think about posture and standing up. Like your body is constantly correcting itself to keep the head safe. And the same will occur when you're on the bike. So a lot of these movements and compensations that you make on the bike will simply be subconscious. So that's kind of what your body has to do when it's on the bike. How gravity affects that is that gravity is constantly acting upon you. You need to balance the weight of your head with the rest of your body on the bike so that you're in a position that's sustainable. If your body weight is too far forward and your head weight is too far forward and you put more weight on your hands into the front of the bike, then the front of your bike is going to tire you out quicker. And similarly, if you sit too far back in one direction, then you may not have enough weight on the handlebars and not be able to control the bike. So that in a very basic way is kind of how we think about this weight distribution on the bike. I mean, there's a lot more nuance into that as well, but I think just getting the concept of, where weight acts on your bike is probably an important one for everyone to kind of understand.
Yeah. So when I heard this tip first, 2 things went off in my brain. Number one, like John mentioned a really good point about, like you were saying, weight distribution. And like you were saying, like the head is always the priority. The body carrying that mushy thing inside your skull safely. And on a bike, you're effectively being pulled forward by gravity towards the earth, and the act of pushing on the pedals is keeping you from falling forward and slamming your face into the floor or your stem or whatever gets there first. But there's another thing that kind of went off in my brain about this kind of tip, was that you have to have the capacity through your body in order to resist the gravitational pull and maintain your posture on the bike. So there's two kind of components to this. Number one, the bike environment has to be in a good place to allow you to balance your weight and kind of your head on top of your shoulders relative to your hips and your feet effectively. So, this is everything that we talk about in a bike fit. So saddle position relative to feet, front end position relative to feet, but also how you are creating stability on the bike yourself through your muscles, your kind of, your posture, your core stability, through your feet, your hips, your legs, all that kind of stuff. And that to me is kind of where I would encourage people to think about this kind of tip that John's offered, is like, how are you creating your stability on the bike? Are you relying on the bike to resist gravity for you, i.e., like you said, bracing against the handlebars and using the bike as a crutch? Or are you actively in control of your stability on the bike and thus in control to some degree of yourself relative to the pull of gravity? So if you think about like lifting a box or doing a deadlift and the mechanics of like a hip hinge, if you perform a hip hinge well, you can lean forward quite dramatically in some cases if your mobility will allow. But as your head moves forward, your hips go back, balancing effectively the scales.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do on the bike with your position in relation to gravity.
Yeah.
So that you can maintain the posture and the position for as long as it's necessary at the desired output without putting additional stress on your body in order to resist gravity. Yeah. So that we have more energy to apply force through the pedals and thus propel you forward through time and space.
Yeah, and just as some quick examples of how the bike can affect this, the obvious one to me is like seat tube angle.
Yeah.
So if you've got a steep seat tube angle, then that will effectively project your hips forward relative to your feet. So, bring your hips forward and therefore bring your torso forward. And so your overall body weight shifts forward and therefore will put more weight into the handlebars, into your arms, require more core strength, more kind of upper body strength in order to maintain that position. But other things can affect it as well, like your body shape, your morphology, your physiology will affect it too. So if you're particularly muscular in your upper body, then you'll project more weight forward, and therefore maybe in order to balance that out, to have more sustainable position on the bike, then you may need a more rearward seating position, i.e. the ability to get your hips further back to balance out the weight of your kind of upper body. And so this is how bike geometry and your body interact. And so choosing the right geometry, saddle position that allow you to balance out your body and create the work that you need to do on the bike is really important. So yeah, a complex subject, but hopefully the concept of it, of creating balance and understanding how gravity acts on your body is an important one for everyone to consider. So yeah, just think about, are you putting too much weight on your hands? And maybe the reason, if you are, is that your weight distribution is a little bit off. Or if you're, what other things will people feel when they're kind of a little bit unbalanced?
Feel like balancing a tennis racket on your hand.
Yeah.
Because if you're perching on a saddle that's maybe too high, or you haven't got you want to keep all your weight on the pedals. Well, most of your weight on the pedals, so that you've got your centre of gravity really low to the ground as possible. You feel a lot more balanced.
But if you're unbalanced, you might not be able to put that weight into the pedals. Like we're slipping off the front of the pedals, slipping off the front of the saddle.
There's a lot of weight going into the front of your foot. You feel a lot of pressure on your knees. You'll bias more towards your quads. Yeah. All these kind of things may lead you to explore weight distribution.
Thanks for listening, and tune in tomorrow for another bike fit tip from the Cycling Demystified 12 Days of Bike Fitting. If you've enjoyed what you've heard or found any of the information has made a difference for your riding, we would be super grateful if you could do two things. Firstly, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star rating or review, as this really helps other riders find our podcast and access the same useful information you've been enjoying. Secondly, tell your friends on the next group ride to give us a listen. The more you can spread the word, the more riders can find a better ride. Thanks again, and catch you on the next one.
Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Way or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time, keep on spinning.